If you're always comfortable and you're always kind of feeling safe where you are, then you're never going to push yourself to do more and to learn more. And so if you're not learning more, if you're too comfortable, there's a fine balance of comfort versus growth. You don't want to push yourself too far, but you always got to be making sure you're learning, whether it's in your career, whether it's in your personal life, your religious life, all of these things.
Shalom, welcome everybody. And this is our third episode of the Aryeh podcast. And this week we have Ilan Regenbaum, the VP of Operations of Heaven Drones. And so let's start right with the podcast. Tell me your story. How did you got where you are now?
Thanks for having me on the podcast. It's good to be here. I've been in Israel coming on, I think it's about 7 years now. Grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, originally from South Africa. Studied at Yeshiva University in New York, and very much involved in the startup ecosystem. And so coming to Israel, a big part of me being here is not just living in the Jewish state and being part of the Zionistic dream of generations of Jews, but rather, in addition, it is also about identifying ways that Israel can be light unto nations and or l'goyim, to help Jews here and people in Israel and around the world. And I've been able to do that through technology, through innovation, and through the startup nation, with many people title Israel.
Interesting. So I've researched a little bit about you. I want to know your background on the IDF and how you started the accelerator, and going a little bit into detail on that.
Yeah, sure. So as part of having to move to Israel, when I first moved here, the rules, they change all the time when it comes to Olim immigrants having to draft to the IDF and serve. But I was required post my university I was 24 years old, had to do a 6-month service, what was then called Shlav Bet. And so I came to Israel knowing that I would take a 6-month break from whatever job I was doing. And so my first kind of major job here in Israel, I was working at a venture capital fund investing in startups. So when I took that job, I said to the partners there, this is amazing, thank you for hiring me, but I got to take 6 months off when I get my draft notice from the IDF. And I had no idea what I would be doing. I hoped that I would get lucky and get into a good unit. And through a bit of networking, speaking to people, actually through one of the interns that I had at this investment fund that I was working at, was introduced to somebody in one unit in the Air Force who introduced me to another, until eventually I got to my commander, who eventually became my commander, and he was the founder of the Air Force's Innovation Department. And so I drafted there directly for 6 months and really loved what I was doing. It was meant to be quick in and out 6 months, but after the first 6 months, I signed another 6 months. And then after a year there, I started Keva. So it became it wasn't it was my required service anymore, and eventually rose up to become the interim commander of the unit. And whilst there, founded the Air Force Accelerator with some other people in the unit. And the goal of the unit overall was the Air Force, Israeli Air Force is probably the most innovative and open-minded military organization in the world. And yet still it requires people to always be thinking outside the box and identifying challenges, because any organization that has more than 2 people in it, you're going to have disagreements, you're going to have inefficiencies, because while people joke and are annoyed about the concept of bureaucracy, the idea of a bureaucracy is important in large organizations, because you have to have rules, you have to know where payments go and this goes, and how the methodologies of the organization works, but that can also create inefficiencies. And so having the ways of making a massive organization of tens of thousands of people function, but also thinking outside the box and remaining innovative, are very important. So the goal of the unit was to identify those challenges and create systems for solving them. And so it's changed a lot where it stands today. I've already been a few years out of that unit back in the civilian world, but whilst there, we identified that there were a lot of small challenges. And so we said, well, what's a great way that brings ideas to the surface in the startup world? An accelerator, where you have entrepreneurs that have an idea, and then given them a little bit of money, a little bit of maybe free office space, mentorship, they accelerate that idea into what eventually becomes a startup. And so we took that same model and had people, both soldiers submit ideas and challenges, but also senior commanders submit challenges. And so we had between 7 and 10 teams per cohort. There have been a couple cohorts now, and they worked in addition to the regular job over about a 10-week, few month program. They would come and have lectures from top entrepreneurs, mentors, and how to take these internal challenges that the Air Force, and eventually it wasn't just the Air Force, but other parts of the military and security apparatus participated as well. How do you identify ways of, well, first of all, is this actually a problem? And is this something we should actually spend money about trying to solve? And then, okay, we now know it's a problem. How do we solve that problem? And so this was the accelerator, and it's now, since the Air Force Innovation Unit started, which was probably the first dedicated innovation unit in the entire IDF. Since that started, now there's countless units across the whole entire IDF that are titled the Innovation Unit. My last job, I was running the Innovation Unit for the Spokespersons Unit in the Army, and now there's an entire battalion run by a one-star general called Shiloh, which is an innovation unit there. So there's a whole amazing growth of innovation and innovative thinking that was already in a very innovative organization that is Tzahal, that is the IDF, but it's gotten even more integrated within the whole organization.
Oh, so you say that you stayed. Your original plan was to stay for 6 months, and then you extended, and you extended again. What was the thing that just wanted you, like, I want to stay here for so long? Like, what was that motivator? Like, what was pulling you in so hard to stay there?
A big part of it is a lot of Olim and people come to Israel, and I think especially our generation, the millennial generation, or whatever, kind of how everyone you break up people that are like in their 20s and 30s right now, is they want meaning in what they're doing. And so to move to Israel is one thing. It's a big challenge moving to Israel. By no means is it an easy thing to do. But even more than that, it's about coming here and feeling, at least for me, feeling like I was making a difference. And so while I love the startup world initially and it helped to ground me, it wasn't enough. And so when I got to join the IDF, I was serving something bigger than myself. And so after 6 months and another 6 months, and seeing that you're actually making some change, and so what I often call the most rewarding and frustrating few years of my life, because it was very, very difficult, but the amount of meaning that you got from it, just every single day, putting on that uniform and serving something greater than yourself, a country that you believe so much in, and I believe so much in, it was immensely meaningful. And not to mention, on top of all of that, I'll cut you off there, but not to mention on top of all that, I literally had my dream unit, because it's one thing to serve. I really truly believe that I would have made the best of wherever I was, whether I was a combat soldier, whether I was in the Navy, wherever it may have been. But because I also got to work in a unit that was the innovation unit, we were working with startups, we would do programs and partnerships. We'd sit at WeWork and at Google and at Facebook and all these different places. It was the best of both worlds. I got to be in the startup world doing innovation, but also serving my country. So it was amazing.
So to summarize that, you believe that the way to find meaning is going beyond yourself, and also working on something that you're passionate on, both of them at the same time. Does that?
Yeah, to the best of your ability. And I would even add one more to that, and something that you're always learning. That it's, I think in our day and age, especially once again, if you believe in the concept of generational change, that there's a lot of kind of self-centeredness in our society. Especially in these younger age groups. And so being able to find meaning is one thing, but that meaning oftentimes has to be beyond yourself. And so I was able to find that meaning in Israel and more general. And even now that I'm in the civilian world, while I do reserve duty on and off in a number of different units here and there, I still reach out to different commanders or people that I know. How can I be helpful to them? But not just about the IDF, but other places that it could always be helpful. Because I think that giving mentality is super important about how can you give to others, but then that also instills meaning in what you're doing. And it's beyond the individual. And then also finding what you love. It's, even if you're doing something that's meaningful, it becomes very, very difficult if you're not liking what you're doing, which you can. Not every day is going to be sunshine and rainbows, and you're going to love everything you do. You can't be so delusional about that, because work is work. But to overall love what you're doing, I think is very important. And for me, even more important is that you make sure you're learning, because it's very easy. My father, who I very much look up to, and quote, has lots of great quotes. One of the quotes that he had above his desk is that comfort and growth do not exist together. If you're always comfortable and you're always kind of feeling safe where you are, then you're never going to push yourself to do more and to learn more. And so if you're not learning more, if you're too comfortable, there's a fine balance of comfort versus growth. You don't want to push yourself too far, but you always got to be making sure you're learning, whether it's in your career, whether it's in your personal life, your religious life, all of these things.
Oh, so now that you're talking about discomfort, you said that there were a lot of challenges during your time in serving. What were those challenges, and how did you handle them?
I joke about my entire Aliyah experience, but especially in the army, that some of the toughest things about moving to Israel is that the language was very difficult. And I speak, I think, decent Hebrew, but I'm definitely not fluent. My family doesn't live here, and there's no 2-day delivery with the Amazon Prime. But that, all joking aside, the language was very difficult. The culture is very difficult. And by the time they drafted me, I was 25, 26. And my first commander in basic training, she was 19. And I come from having a real job with a real salary and real freedom to being locked up with a bunch of teenagers and being bossed around and having no freedom. And so that you're in the military. And so you give up a level of freedom for that. And so even when I was in my job, there'd be times where we'd have a big meeting or a big conference coming up, and all of a sudden we get an email from one of the other commanders saying, "Oh, sorry, you got to go send either yourself or send one of your soldiers out to go and do a guard duty at some base or some yeshuv community in the really far away." And it's like, no, we need them. We got to do work. It's like, yeah, but you got to balance all these things. So there was a lot of frustration, but you got to come with the mindset that you got to balance both what the organization needs, what your unit needs, what your team needs, and then what your own personal wants and needs are.
Interesting. So with the language barrier, I guess that you had, it sounds like innovation, you have to do a lot of pitches. Do you have to do the pitches in English or in Hebrew?
There were times where I would do both, depending on, I have very good Hebrewish, but I think in the startup world, there is very much a concept of when you're pitching ideas, there's lots of Hebrew kind of innovation words thrown in that how do you say startup in Hebrew? Startup. When you sell your company, what do you have? You have an exit. There's a lot of English words peppered in, and as well as in the innovation world. So you have like a concept of innovation, which is chadsanut, but then you also have like bottom up or top down innovation. So you'll have these commanders that initially had no idea what all these innovation ideas were, and then over the years you'd start to hear them when they would be presenting. They'd say, "אנחנו רוצים לעשות תוכנית חדשנות bottom up," and they'll say half Hebrew, half English. And so oftentimes I would try to speak in Hebrew whenever I can. It definitely helped improve my Hebrew. There were times, even today, I'll send an email in Hebrew and somebody will respond, how old are you? Because my Hebrew is, especially writing, is not where it needs to be. But I always challenge myself and try and integrate into the culture as much as possible. And it makes for good jokes. When I was in basic training, we were told to run to the mitvach. And a mitvach sounded very similar to a word I already knew, mitbach. So I ran to the mitbach, which is the kitchen, while the rest of my squad, they ran to the shooting range, which is a mitvach. So that slight difference luckily I was just embarrassed by it. But funny things like that happened. And there's many soldiers that have stories about the difference between neshek, which is a gun, versus nshika, which is a kiss. And it happens. Hebrew is a tough language, but as long as you have a good mindset and always trying to learn, you just got to laugh it off.
Interesting. And when you talk again about like the uncomfort zone, how do you manage to put yourself on the uncomfort zone like in a daily basis? Or if
I
if a
would
young guy tells like I want to be uncomfortable and grow a bit, what would you tell them?
Um, I think it's all about just know, like I think the saying goes, hope for the best, plan for the worst. I never like I said before, there is a balance of challenging yourself, putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation, but also knowing your limits. That
Mm.
not everyone can be. I very much. I think Elon Musk, for example, the Tesla and SpaceX, and the guy is a genius. He's a workaholic. He's changing the world. Not everyone can be Elon Musk. And despite me sharing a name with him, at least I spell it correctly. But um, it's really difficult to be on all the time and always challenging yourself and always to be and I find that difficult even myself, that when I am not able to be as productive as I want on a given day, or to be able to do everything that I have want to do, it's you can't always be on. And so it's this fine balance of understanding that you're in a new country. And so I know this I've spoken a lot about kind of an Aliyah, moving to Israel centric focus. I'm happy to touch on that a little bit later in the podcast. I don't think that the ideal is, I would love to see more people in Israel and Israel's population grow, but Israel's a tough place, and it cannot be for everyone. And so if you're here, also knowing that you move here, that unto itself is a challenge. It's a big decision to move here. Or if you don't move here, whatever it is, but knowing wherever you are in life, knowing the challenges you face right now, knowing what you can handle. And so sometimes just moving to the country and making sure you have a place to live and a social circle, that's enough. And setting yourself goals along the way. So always challenging yourself and making sure you don't get too comfortable, but not trying to pile everything on. It's a really difficult thing to do. And I'm living that right now. Thank God. I've this past year has been insane for a lot of people. It's been insane for myself too, but I've also been very lucky in that right now I'm planning for a wedding in just over a month. I'm remodeling my apartment. I'm super busy at work. I have a bunch of extra side projects that I run. So it's about knowing when to say no and when to balance and when to push yourself.
Interesting. I suffer like most people suffer what you were saying, like of not. I also suffer from what you're saying, like I push myself sometimes too hard, and then you crash. You just go into patterns where you just go for like, for example, with this project, I push sometimes my to like the amount of money I'm trying to fundraise is like something that people take a lot of time to fundraise, and I'm trying to get like the best speakers and like people, and it's like many times it's like maybe you should take it like slowly. It's better to take 5 years and do it right, and do it gradually, slowly, instead of just like trying to do it all quick now. It's maybe there's like this mentality that you have to be successful for yesterday in our world, touching a little bit on the self-centeredness, like everything has to be here right now, and there's no there's no opportunity to open up. So I do agree with you on that.
And it's a fine balance. It's about knowing when sometimes to know what's good enough and not to be a perfectionist, but also not to be lazy, not to get complacent. So you always have to balance, and
It's a very hard
obvious
balance.
life.
It's extremely difficult because it's like the balance is so like difficult to find, because many times I'm being a lazy bum, and then I go the other side and it's like now I'm being too hard on myself, and it's like so hard to find exactly how do you manage to not push yourself too hard, but or many times like you feel that you're not doing enough. Maybe that should be like maybe you are doing enough. Maybe
Yeah,
it's
and that's why you got to be true to yourself. You got to know that there are times where you just need to slow down, relax, go on a vacation, I don't know, watch some Netflix, or times where you're like, stop being a lazy bum and get off the couch. But you got to know when to be true to yourself, because everyone needs to relax, but also everyone needs to push themselves.
that's true. So I have a question for you. It seems that what most people claim that success is, you've accomplished it. Like according to a lot of people, you would be considered successful. But I want to ask you, what is your definition of success? And do you feel that you're there already, or that you're still on your on your path towards success?
I'm always on my path towards success. I think that to an extent, I consider myself successful for where I hope to be at this point in my life. Could I have been more successful? Could I have had more money or whatever it might be? But yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I think overall, the idea of it very much ties into what we were just saying, though, that it's about knowing yourself, setting goals, moving forward, but also not being too hard on yourself and being unattainable. And so if you don't have a goal and you're too comfortable, then what is success? Because success is always a goalpost that I think you should be moving. Because if you hit success and say, well, success is I have, I don't know, a beautiful family, a stable job, a fulfilling job, ability to learn, to have friends and all of that stuff, and
Yeah, when
health
you
and
get
all of
there.
that. But
When you
then
get there, then what?
but also so that you always say though that if you achieve a certain level of wealth or success in your career, and that's where you want to be and you're happy, then great. And for me right now, thank God, I'm very happy where I am. But I want to see myself continue to grow. I want to learn more about my business. I want my company to grow. I want to continue to see financial success. I thank God I've been able to learn a lot and considering that I'm didn't grow up religious and have given at a point where my Jewish learning I'm able to give shiurim and teach other people.
Mm.
But you never, for me at least, I want to be able to learn more. I want to be more successful, but to always balance, because I think work-life balance, family, all of that is a super important thing. You can't do it all. And you look at very successful people that try to do it all, that they might be billionaires, that they might have amazing companies and foundations, but then their personal lives suffer. And so you have to understand what's important and continually reassess. I had an amazing class when I was in Yeshiva University. I studied finance, but one of the classes that they started in the business school, I'm not sure if it's still there, but it was called Principles of Success. An amazing professor and individual, Charlie Harari, taught this course. And the idea is business and is it's not just about financial success, but how do you view success more broadly? And he quoted a study that was apparently done at Yale University that said that they gave half the group, they said, we want you to set a 5-year plan, and the other group, they said, we don't set a 5-year plan. And the group with a 5-year plan would reassess that plan every year or every 5 years. And if you had a plan, you're more successful. I once tried to find that study to quote again in a talk I was giving, and I found out that apparently the study didn't happen in that exact model and not at Yale. But either way, I think the point is still there, is that you have to have a direction, but you have to be willing to be flexible. Because my grandmother, Alea Shalom, always say in Yiddish, "Mens schafft und Gott lacht." Man plans and God laughs. You never know where life is going to take you. You have to have a good sense of humor, know how to adapt, but always have that goal in the future, and know when the goal is attainable, when to push yourself, and when to adjust.
Yeah, that's so definitely right. By the way, I also saw a similar study to the one that you're discussing.
I'm sure there are many ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard someone quote it. I can send it to you. I can look if I can find the source. So what is if we're talking so much about success, what specifically means to be successful? Is it just what goals you set in life, and if you're achieving them and you're constantly achieving them, that's why you're trying to define success as?
It's an individual thing, because there are
Yeah.
some people, for them success is to have they've got whatever number in mind. This is what they want to have in their bank account. For some people, success is money doesn't matter. It's so long as they can put food on the table and have a family. And there are people that have it all and are depressed. There was another study, I think it was actually, I want to say it was Dan Ariely, the economist. I think he quotes this. There was a study done, but I might be misquoting people, so check it up afterwards. But there was apparently some sort of survey done with people that had gone through an accident of some sort where they became paralyzed from the neck down. So you would think these kinds of people would be super depressed, and it compared them to individuals who just won the lottery. And however they managed happiness, this was more talking about happiness, they found out the people that had been through these debilitating injuries and that were now paralyzed ranked much higher on happiness versus people that had just won the lottery. And so I think you can, wherever I heard this idea from, they analyze it much deeper. But I think the idea of happiness is something, and success is something that has to be internally defined by you. And this very much, all these years later, quoting again Charlie Harari about this, his whole idea is that if you're always measuring, I think he called it be, do, have, is that if you measure your success externally, that I'm only successful when I have X car, or when I hit this level of seniority in my company, or I have this much money in the bank, well, then it's very difficult to attain that success, because other people are quote unquote telling you, well, you need to be happy. That's what advertising industry is. If you don't drive the latest, if you don't have the newest Tesla, which just arrived in Israel, then you're lacking in some way, and you have to have it to be happy. And then once you get that, you're not happy, and they're like, but the advertisement said I'd be happy. So I think the idea of success, the idea of happiness, I think is an internal thing. For some people, it means much more basic things than others. And I'll, before you move into the next question, and there's a very famous parable about the billionaire that goes on vacation to some little island somewhere, and sees this poor little fisherman throwing fishing on the beach, and they start talking. And I'm probably messing up the story, because I tend to do that with many stories. But the idea being is that the fisherman says, the fisherman's happy with his life. He says he gets every day he fishes, he goes home, he's with his family, he only has to work so hard, he has food, he sits on the beach, he's a very nice life. And this billionaire who spends his whole life, he's divorced, he's managed to escape for a week to go on vacation, is like striving to be able to have a nice quiet life when he's on the beach, and able to enjoy everything that he's worked his whole life for, or she's worked their whole life for. That the idea of happiness is I think is a mindset, and that you need to realize that it's a mindset that you determine, and it's not an external thing.
Yeah. So yeah, Pirkei says that who's rich, the one who's happy with his lot. So
Exactly.
it's very close to what you're saying, and I definitely agree that success and happiness, it's something that's definitely has to be. It's very subjective and very different for each human being. But nevertheless, I do think that there's something we're all striving for. Like maybe the what and how it's different for each one of us, but the why it's similar. Maybe not the same, but we're all trying to get somewhere. Like and that's what I'm like trying to figure out. Like what moves us? Like where are we going to? Like why do we want to do what we want to do? Why are we alive looking for something? Like, and what is that we're looking for? Like we're looking for happiness, you say, but what is happiness? Maybe, as you said, maybe it's a mindset.
It's a mind, but it's different for every person, because you can quote Viktor Frankl, and from Man's Search for Meaning, from philosophers, psychologists. Like the idea of what happiness is, what fulfillment is very different from society to society, from individual to individual, from religion to religion. So I think it's a very tough thing to hammer and to say, hit the nail on the head and say that this is what the pursuit of happiness is. Who knows?
Yeah, I do believe that we do have some universal needs, like significance. A lot of people are looking for significance, for love, for what else? What other growth?
Yeah, you have what's it called? His hierarchy of needs.
Of Maslow.
Sorry.
Of Maslow hierarchy of needs.
You have, but I think though, even still, you look at our society today. Think about it. 100 years ago, people were the life expectancy was much less. Disease, poverty. I mean, a wealthy person 200 years ago didn't have running. In many ways, didn't have running water. Didn't have basic food that even some of the poorest people in our modern society still have today. Yet, I mean, you can argue this in many different ways, but I would tend to argue that a poor farmer 100 years ago or 200 years ago that didn't know what they didn't have, so long as they can achieve certain things, they were happy with their life. I might be making an assumption. Versus today, where people have so much more, they have lost track of what the goal is, what it means to be happy, and they get too caught up at so much of the non-important things that our society deems it.
Actually, sometimes misfortune is is a blessing disguised in many ways, because you're having like meaning through that many times, like even though it's
Well,
not
yeah,
evident.
yeah, it's a tough one to say about misfortune having ups and downs, but I think the concept of life is a roller coaster. I wish that everyone has healthy, happy,
No,
good life,
definitely,
but if you
definitely.
don't have any downturns in your life, and even if they're small, hopefully they're just small little dips in your life. But if you don't have anything to weigh your happiness and success against, then you have no base to measure against.
Yeah, but I think what we're touching is that there's like a beauty in simplicity, in not wanting more than what you need, and
Right.
just being minimal in so many, like not wanting the best car, and like not striving many times to give a better sense of fulfillment. And I think that you're right, that maybe like, but I think even back in the generation before, they were looking, although they were not, they were still looking for some fulfillment. Just the and the significance, for example, is just they got it in a different way than we're
Right.
used to now. Maybe significance back then was being the one that helps the most in the community, and that gives me like a sense of importance. Like, look, I'm contributing. And
Right.
nowadays, it's the bar is like so much higher, than you have to do so much to feel a little bit significant, which is it's as I said, like sometimes that the world is not that advanced. It gives you a more levels of happiness because the bar is lower. But yeah, it's a, and now let's go back to how they when I love like when people start. Were you able to like? What were your fears when you were starting away? Like, did you had any fears, or you were always confident? I can do this. I'm gonna make it. This is gonna go the way I want it to be.
Well, I always am worried about failure and not succeeding. But it's also about knowing where the risks are. I started my first company when I was in middle school and took all my bar mitzvah money and started photography business, which I ended up selling and basically using it to pay for college. It
Oh,
was so you looking at that. That's my first startup. People are like how like both my parents were entrepreneurs. They were very supportive of me and they nurtured me in that sense. But I also knew at that point, okay, I'm going to take all this money. I think I found a good market. I think I can make money. I was making a ton of money as a high schooler. And but if it all failed, and I spent all my bar mitzvah money and it all disappeared, well, I still had a house, I still had a family, and I still had support. And so throughout a lot of the things that I've done in my life, it's about balancing risk. And so yeah, I'm never so certain that everything will be perfect and that I'm going to always succeed, because I think a good
yeah.
dose of understanding the risks and understanding that you're not infallible is very important. So everything I've done, did I think that coming to Israel would be the easiest thing? Definitely not. Did I think that joining the army and going in the startup world? Definitely not. If I really wanted the easiest thing to do, I could have stayed in America, found a nice, safe job at a big company, a big corporation, worked my way up the ranks. But that was considered like the American dream many years ago, and even that though is not the safest thing anymore. Interestingly enough, and so there's risk everywhere. And how do you balance those risks with a good, healthy sense of understanding them?
Yeah. What would you say to somebody that has an irrational fear of failure? That it's like there's not risk, but he's still afraid to jump into the water and try to do something new. Like, and why is that? Like many guys, like they have like you're in college, you have nothing to lose. Why don't you just try to do something? Worst comes to worst, you fail.
It's a societal thing, as we were talking about before. You started recording about the education system. I can't irrational. I can't talk to that level. I'm by no means a psychiatrist, but a psychologist. But I think the everything in life, every choice you make means you're it's taking you down a different path, and it's it
Hmm.
there's risks involved in everything. There's a risk involved in doing and the risk involved in not doing. And so when people, and I think one of the standard ones, when people say like, oh God, if only I can win the lottery. And then God's like, well, then buy a lottery ticket. It's, if you are afraid of doing anything, well, then you're never going to succeed at anything. So I think even the individual, I don't care. I don't think everyone should be an entrepreneur. I don't think everyone should go and be a doctor or a lawyer, whatever your path takes you. But you got to put yourself out there to be successful in whatever you're doing, and know that there are risks there. Because if you want to become a doctor, well, not everyone gets into medical school. You want to be a lawyer, well, not everyone gets into a good firm and continues in the legal field. So there's a risk everywhere, and so I think it's just about having an understanding of those risks, having a strong support network and community, and a strong professional and personal community that can advise you. Because a person is not an island, and especially in the Jewish world, the idea of community, I think, is one of the most amazing things about our religion and the Jewish world, is how strong and interconnected our community is and supportive it is. And so in being able to reach out to people and have a network, not only of your family, but being able to have a strong business community and professional community of how to learn and support other people and learn from their mistakes, I think is something that can very much mitigate those risks of people that are not sure what they want to do with their lives or afraid of doing anything.
Interesting. Were you ever afraid of rejection, or of like going and like pitching your idea and that they're gonna say no, I don't like it?
Yeah, but you can't take things personally. I've heard this from a number of venture capitalists that I think and startup investors. At the end of the day, one of the easiest jobs, and obviously I'm way oversimplifying this, but one of the easiest jobs in the world is being an investor in startup. Because you have a startup that comes before you with, they've invested their life. They're coming to you with their heart on a platter, saying like, this is my startup. I've invested everything. I think it's going to change the world. An investor just says yes or no. The entrepreneurs, it's the hardest thing to do. And so if you go forward and don't fear rejection, then I think you're, what they say in Hebrew, you're living in a movie. You're living not in reality. There's a risk of failure and rejection everywhere, but there's life after rejection. There's life after failure. I once had an interview. It was for an internship. It wasn't that big of a deal, but I sat down for this interview with this guy, and I handed my resume, and he looks at it and he stares me straight in the eye and he says, Ilan, I would never hire you in a million years. Not the thing you want to hear in an interview. And like at that point, my heart drops. I'm like, well, why would you say that? He said, you would hate this job. You're too entrepreneurial. This, like, I see your resume. You're trying to fit into a box that I assume whoever was trying to think that you fit in that box. Why are you interviewing for this? And so in the end, he ended up advising me on different things in the future. And I recently emailed that individual for some more advice all these years later. Rejection is not the end of the world, so long as you have a healthy outlook and an understanding that your self-worth is not attached to external people's opinions like that. And so, yeah, you get rejected, you don't get the job, even if you think you're the perfect fit. So it's their loss. And it's a lot easier said than done. But I think it's just having a healthy understanding that not everyone sees the world the way you do. And so they don't want to work with you. They don't want to hire you. They don't want to invest in you. So it's for the better, because you'll find somebody that you'll work better with.
Interesting that you bring this up, because it sounds like that guy actually thought that you were good. It's just like you were not the best fit for this type of job. He wasn't saying you're not good enough. He was saying actually you're way good enough, but not for this. You should try what you're actually fit for.
You could read that a few ways though, because at the end of the day, like what was he really thinking? Like, for this financial analyst role, yes, I was studying finance. Yes, on paper, could I've technically done this role? But he saw my backgrounds, and so could he have just been being kind of nice and kind of a bit facetious in the way he was saying it to me? At the end of the day, I wasn't my team. I wasn't good for that role, but he realized it and spun it in a good way. And so I guess you could also learn another lesson from this, that when you're rejecting someone, there are different ways of doing it, and sometimes there's nicer ways. Sometimes there's no ways of doing it nicely. But there are times where it's like, where if a lawyer walks in or a doctor walks in to go and get a job as a lawyer, or vice versa, then of course they're going to be rejected. There are
Yeah.
times where like, okay, you're not the perfect fit, but there's a nice way of telling the person that. And hopefully everyone can find meaning and find things that they're good at and not face rejection. But it's also understanding where your strengths and weaknesses are and working towards them. Because if you know that you are not a numbers person and you're not going to be good sitting and doing Excel docs all day long, so then why are you applying for accounting or financial roles? It's you just because society or you think it's a safe job or whatever the role is. Why are you putting yourself through that if you know that you're not suited? So of course you're going to get rejected. So once again, it's obviously an oversimplification because there are times where I've been rejected for jobs where I thought I was so perfectly suited, and then I see who they ended up hiring. That they hire somebody with the master's and PhD, and it's like, okay, so now I understand what they were really looking for. Of course they were going to reject me because I don't have that experience. One day maybe I will, but I just don't take it personally.
Yeah, so that's a good one. Don't take it personally. It's so hard. It's easy to say, hard to do. Like I personally, this thing has challenged me. One of the things that's challenged me the most is this project, having to go fundraise and recruit and like speak to people. It just has shattered me in many ways, and it's like so hard to have to do it over and over, and like having to pick up the phone and call something, and it's not a one-time rejection. It's like getting rejected over and over, and it's just like, how do you like? I know I'm not fit for doing this, but if I don't do it, who's gonna do it? That is the thing.
Right, and there, I coming back because I love the startup analogies, but there's the great story of the guys from Airbnb that they went to a super famous investor in New York, and they had to for them to raise money, they maxed out all their credit cards. I mean, Airbnb is now worth billions, and so it was during the election, I believe it was between the U.S. election between John McCain and Barack Obama. And so they went to the different conventions, the Republican and Democratic convention. They made cereals. They just bought boxes of cereals and put stickers on them that said it was McCain-O's and Obama-O's. Like they made a cereal based on each of the candidates. And they sold them for like $20 or a box. So like they made tons of margins on these cereals, but they raised like $20,000 to help the company continue. And they went to the super famous investor in New York who'd had lots of very successful companies and behind him, and they're already starting to see traction, and he turned them down. And to this day, so the story goes, so he said, I heard the podcast a few years back, he still has a box of one of those cereals on his in his office, because it's sometimes no is just the beginning, and it's the motivation, and it doesn't, it forces you to keep on trying so long as you know, because I think especially being an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs are inherently like insane people. Because as an entrepreneur, what are you saying? That I have an idea to do something differently that nobody else does it. I want to change the world. What was it? One of the things that you grew up with that your parents told you not to do? Never get in the car with a stranger. You got Uber now. Like you get in the car with a stranger, not just Uber, Lyft. Like all these different companies stay in a stranger's house with Airbnb. They're counter to like what society is. An entrepreneur is somebody who views the world in an inherently different way. And so of course you're going to get lots of rejections. And you have a lot of famous funds. I think it's Bessemer Venture Capital. They have, I think they call it their anti-portfolio, that all the companies that came across their desk, I don't remember all of them, but like billion-dollar, well-recognized companies that came to Bessemer, whatever fund it is, and Bessemer's turned them down and said, yeah, guys, this isn't going to be anything. And now they're worth billions, tens, hundreds of billions of dollars. Every investor, everyone has these situations where they told somebody no, and then they showed them. So you never know where and rejection will be an opportunity, or the rejector will look back and say, oh, if only I'd invested, or if only I had hired them, or whatever it might be. Did I lose you?
Sorry, connection. Yeah, I think are you back? Yeah, I think I'm back now. Sorry about that. Yeah, I did hear it. Most of it, it was just the image froze.
Okay.
Well, can you just repeat the last part? That part I did cut off.
So just the last bit I was saying that they're one famous investor, I believe it is Bessemer Venture Partners, a big U.S. Startup investor. They have, I think they call it their anti-portfolio, where it's all of the startups that came to raise money from them and that they didn't invest in. And I don't know exactly which ones, but startups in the level of like Google and Facebook, like really worth billions, hundreds of billions of dollars today, and they turned them down. The startups came to them asking for money and they were rejected. And so now obviously investment fund, they're the ones who are like, they got egg on their face because they missed out on that. But rejection could be an opportunity. It's all what comes down to mindset. You don't take it personal, and you learn from those mistakes. And sometimes it's a good thing because people understand that, okay, maybe, yeah, I made a mistake in hindsight, 2020 hindsight, but you got to always look forward.
Yeah, yeah. The thing is how you change your mindset to that, because I know that intellectually, I know that every rejection it's a step forward, but still when you're doing it, it doesn't feel that way. It still like many times I just like many times it's just like let's give up. I don't want to keep doing this. It's too much. Like I can handle too much rejection. So it's like how do you change your mindset and be like, okay, yeah, it's a rejection, whatever. Take the next.
It's a concept of resiliency. I'm trying to remember the name of the book and the author, but just the idea of mental resiliency and knowing how to build up this, not an emotional wall, but just how to be able to take things not personally and to be able to move forward. There are tools, there are authors, there are experts that speak about this. So I think there's a lot to learn, and thank God I've grown up with very much a lot of resilience and the ability to develop that, and kind of the being very much an optimist, even when a lot of my loved ones around me are like annoyed at my kind of eternal optimism. But it's something I think you can develop, and there's lots of great resources to learn how to develop that mindset.
Interesting. So tell me more about the company of drones. Like, what is it all about? How did you start? Like, specifically going into that. I want to know more about this drones.
Yeah, so with all the different startups and investment funds and my time in the Air Force, that I wanted, for me, it was very important that I work in organizations and companies that are doing amazing things and not just in it for the money. Of course, you need the money to be able to change the world and do good things, but how are they making the world better, safer, and all of that? And so Heaven's whole idea, it's just under 2 years old, the company, or just over 20 employees, raised a couple $1 million. And the idea behind the company is that most drones today on the market are just cameras in the sky. And we view the regulations and technology are finally at an inflection point where we think that drones will be already are able to be robots in the sky that are able to do actionable tasks, most basic being delivery. So we have a drone that can lift a payload of 120 kilos, about 250 pounds, just payload. So, and it's about the size, it fits in the back of a pickup truck. So it's quite a small drone. So they're super stable, able to fly for long periods of time. And so we can do delivery very easily for Amazon or wherever it might be. Our smaller drone can take about 10 kilos and drop off a little package from Amazon very quickly. Hopefully one day Amazon would want to use our packages, but we're working with other delivery and medical delivery companies on that front. But it's about looking towards the future. Our technology has our drones being able to be very stable. So we're trying to envision a future where, like in movies, where you have drones that are able to accomplish things. So imagine a drone with a couple robotic arms that is able to manipulate things and to be able to fly around and repair things, and a situation where there's a hiker. So we're working on a drone that can carry even larger weights on a very small platform. So a hiker that hurts themselves and is in an area where it's too dangerous for a helicopter, or a helicopter can't land. So our larger drone in theory can land, either deliver emergency supplies. You have a fleet of drones that can be able to fly and land and evacuate, do medevac. You can have, rather than having a giant crane on a construction site, a fleet of drones that are able to move things around the construction site, build buildings. There's talk about being able to use drones and attach large format 3D printers that can print concrete and that are able to fly and build buildings. We're looking at a future, we call it the actionable future of drones, where drones, as I said at the beginning, are not just flying cameras, but are flying robots that can do things that can be an actionable platform for the future of drones.
Wow, that's wild.
It's a very cool industry.
Yeah, and so what has been the progress, or what is like right now the so far what have you guys accomplished?
We've got pilots with a number of different organizations. Pizza Hut in Israel is testing pizza delivery with our drones. A bunch of different other companies delivering medical supplies and medical tests. We're working with the military, figuring out how drones can protect and save lives. A lot of different pilots and programs there. Lots and lots of different stuff, both in Israel and the United States and all around the world. We've a bunch of different programs going on. And we've developed 3 different platforms, a small one which carries 10 kilos, a medium level one which can carry about 45 kilos, about 100 pounds. And then our biggest one right now does 120 kilos, and we're even developing bigger ones.
And what is your view in 5 years or 10 years, with not only with this but with all your vision of life as a whole? What are you trying to get? Where is your success in 5 years?
Please God that the drone industry continues to grow, that we figure out how to quietly and safely have drones doing things that the economy wants and that society wants. So that they're much more integrated into our lives, that we have less of a need, to be honest, for the defensive side of drones and more civilian use cases, because the society moves in a better direction there. And that our company has hopefully a giant exit and a lot of financial success, but also making the world a better place. I think the ability for drones, but a lot of technology to just change the way we live our lives for the better, whether increasing life expectancy, making our lives more fulfilled. There's so many amazing things that technology can do, and it's how can we use that technology to build products and solutions that make our lives better. And hopefully I can be a big part of that Israel and the Jewish people continue to see, and the broader world continues to be moving towards a more peaceful, healthy, happy lives that is empowered by technology. Because there's lots of right now, whether it's books or movies, lots of dystopian movies where technology takes over, the Black Mirror series. Mirror. I think that technology with morals, technology with a direction and kavana, we can turn technology into something amazing.
You need balance behind it. That you gave the answer: technology with morals.
Yeah. So. Technology. And that's the direction I see it. That we continue to grow and be self-aware and true to ourselves and more open to others and a light unto the nations, and just trying to be a little bit less selfish, more involved in community, making the world a little bit of a better place.
Yeah, I would. That's my favorite topic. I want to talk about that, but it seems like we don't have more time. I do want to know, how do you build moral technology, and how do you make sure that we're always intact? So if you can give me a 2-minute answer, and we can wrap it up with that.
It's a tough one. I think you have people like Elon Musk, even the famous sociologist Yuval Noah Harari wrote *Sapiens* and *Homo Deus* and a bunch of amazing books. Israeli. He says that a lot of people, what the career that people should take today is becoming a philosopher, because we're moving down. There's so many questions the average person today, because of technology, because of society, never had to even think about even 10 years ago. And so I think a big part of that is just being self-aware, understanding that the way on the most personal level, how these things, how a phone affects your relationship with those around you, how technology affects your life, knowing when to disconnect, when to work too much, when to take a vacation. These are all important things, and understanding how to balance technology, because technology is a tool. And I'm very much Maimonidean. I believe in the Rambam's kind of golden path of being
Yeah.
balanced in everything, to never be in any one too extreme, because I can sit and have only interaction through a phone, through electronics, through technology, have technology usurp my life, but we're still humans at the end of the day, and then that personal connection is important. And so at least, thank God, Jews have the concept of Shabbat, where we always have to force to disconnect. But there's also a balance of technology, something that is amazing, and that as it becomes more part of our lives, how do we still know to disconnect but still have Shabbat and balance? Everything is about the balance. And so being deep thinkers and being aware of ourselves and society and how all of it affects us, and having discussions. I think that's the most important part about it. Mindfulness.
Yeah. I think, I think this is again going to the problem that we we're discussing in the beginning. The education system is not building deep thinkers that are trying to solve the world's problems. That should be the focus of education. That should be the goal, building a better society. But no, for some reason, we decided that making money is more important, or at least so far we have, and we have to create that consciousness shift into saying, making deep thinkers, making it all about us and not I. But then you also have the problem when you go too much to the us and you forget about the I. So it's
There's a balance.
it's about the balance.
Life is a balance.
Yeah.
Communism versus diehard capitalism. Whether it's the us versus the I, there's a balance on everything, and it's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Hopefully, on a broader societal level, but also it starts at the individual.
Yeah,
And,
I think that there's one thing you don't balance, and that should be no hatred in your heart and no anger, and just having full love. I think that should be your mindset of whatever you're doing. I think that's the only thing I shouldn't balance, because I think that it's okay to have a little bit anger. It's okay to have a little bit of hatred. I think that's not gonna lead you.
Yeah, I think it's definitely part of it. It's I think avat chinam, like having like immense love and understanding towards those around you is definitely important. But also with everything, you don't want to be. There's times where you can be blind to people taking advantage of you because you're.
No, that's the thing. What is the definition of love? Like, love. Sometimes you have to be tough in your relationships. That's tough love. Like if you have a children crossing the middle of the street with not looking in any direction, you're gonna like smack him a little bit, because not because you hate him, rather because that's the best for him, and you love him, and you wouldn't want him to get hurt. That's what I mean by love. Is not
all of these things. None of this is simple. None of it. All it revolves balance and thought and being mindful of the decisions you make.
Anyway, it was very, very awesome to have you. I enjoyed a lot of our discussions. It was very, very good answers, and like Gemara, like I don't know, I don't have the term for it, like going back and forth. And thank you for being here. I really enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you did too. And I hope to see you again soon.
Thank you very much. Kol hakavod for doing this, and keep up the good work.